The letter to the Galatians is a letter that is full of angst and even anger, really. See, for example, how there is no "I give thanks for" phrase in this letter. In almost every other letter, Paul starts by introducing himself and then listing out some things that he is thankful to God for about the church that he is writing to. But here, any thankfulness that he does have is just crowded out by the seriousness of what is going on in Galatia. Instead, he launches in after introducing himself, verse 6, saying, "I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all." So, here is what has happened, and we'll find out more of these details later on in the book. Paul is one of the people who helped to plant these churches over in the region of Galatia. Of course, because of his particular calling, when each church was healthy enough, he moved on, continuing his ministry of preaching the gospel and planting churches. Now, after he left, a group of false teachers, it seems, subtly infiltrated the church and started to pervert the gospel. And that is the word that Paul uses for it there in verse 7. This new teaching is a perversion, literally a twisting of the truth. So, the Galatian Christians had come to believe, essentially, that you need to earn your way into God's good books in order to be saved. That before God will accept you, you need to take part in certain religious practices, like circumcision and other ceremonies. In essence, before you come to God, you must religiously clean yourself up and sort yourself out. Now, the gospel of grace, the good news of what Christ has done on the cross, says, no, you don't deserve salvation, and you could never earn salvation. You are utterly, spiritually bankrupt. So, if you are going to be made right with this infinitely holy God, it must be brought about by his grace to you, not by your works approaching him. He takes your sin, he gives you the gift of righteousness, he cleans you up, he sorts you out, he welcomes you into his presence, and at the end of it, he gets all the glory. Just drop down to verse 8 for a moment and see how seriously Paul takes this perversion. He says, even if we, that is, we the apostles, or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preached to you, let them be under God's curse. You could not get more serious language than that from the Apostle Paul. If someone twists or distorts the gospel, doesn't matter who they are, even if I come to you, he says, and proclaim some new way of salvation, or even if an angel from heaven does the same, let them be under God's curse. That is Paul's way of saying, let them go to hell for eternity. You know, I've got no doubt in saying that if somebody today as high profile in Christianity as the Apostle Paul was back then, if they said something as highly offensive as this, they would get no end of criticism from well-meaning people, I think, saying, for goodness sake, Paul, you ought to soften up a little bit. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? You're not going to win anybody round with that kind of rhetoric. You won't melt hearts and minds like that, Paul. But Paul is not mincing his words here. This is not a matter of preference or a secondary issue. This is a matter of life and death. More than that, actually. Eternal life and eternal death. And so he says it again to make sure we didn't miss it. Verse 9, as we have already said, so now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them go to hell. Let them be under God's curse. Every false religion, no matter how much apparent wisdom is contained within it, no matter how similar to Christianity it might seem on the surface, every false religion can be boiled down to this: you must work your way into God's good books. Only the gospel will tell you the truth, that the chasm between you and an infinitely holy God is too wide for you to cross. If you're going to be saved, if that chasm will be closed, it will require a miracle, which can be done by him, but cannot be done by you. Now, as we close, I just want us to think about why false religions endure. And the answer, I think, is simply this: they appeal to our pride. False religions, distortions of the gospel, they flatter us. Why? Because they make us the hero of the story. We become the ones who are able to save. And of course, we are the ones who are not so far gone that we are beyond being saved by our own human efforts. False gospels, then, they inflate our strength and they downplay our sin. And of course, that is so appealing, isn't it, to a certain kind of person? To believe that if you work hard, if you follow the steps, if you tick the boxes, you will make it into heaven in the end. Why? Because you are good enough. You are strong enough. If you dig deep, grit your teeth, give it all you've got, follow your precious and very nearly perfect little heart, when you stand before God, He will see just how brilliant you are and say, wow, you're a lot more moral than most people I meet. Why don't you come on into heaven? You see why a false gospel, a distortion of the truth, flatters people. You see the arrogance of false religions that pervert the gospel. Friend, if you have been saved at all, you have been saved only by the grace of God and not by your works, so that no one can boast. Yes, that is a humbling fact, but it is a fact.